Taking high ground is an important aspect of winning as many games as possible in stacked tournaments. So how is it done? Let's take a deeper dive into the EU FNCS that just happened this weekend, and let's see how this height developed over the course of the 6 games. Please like the video, it really helps me with the algorithm. Let's see if we can hit 2k likes in this video, and subscribe if you aren't already for more of this style content and competitive content in general. So let's get into it. So let's start with game 1, which was won by WAN, Podesai and MXR. Technically, it was actually only won by WAN and Podesai because MXR ended up going down early, and this game was actually won as a duo. How this team claimed height and won from height in particular was that they claimed it early in the 4th zone, which is a very typical playstyle. You notice there's a hill in this 4th zone area. They've just positioned themselves second height in a really good spot, so if they pull the 5th zone, they're already in a good position. Obviously, 5th zone pulls really close to them. They notice that the team above them, the only team above them, which was Mosh's trio, drops down and they manage to get some damage off here. Then, Mosh being the only player left on high ground, they can continually pressure him until he drops off, leaving high ground free in the 5th zone. Now this zone's very awkward because, like I said, there is this massive hill, so a lot of the players are going to be on the low ground since they had to climb up it to get into this 5th zone. So if 6th zone continues to pull up the hill, they have a really easy time on high ground because a lot of the teams on low ground are going to really struggle because they have to basically all stay on this really awkward layer and they're all going to be fighting each other in shambles. And yes, they pull first moving. So first moving moves and they have a pretty easy time. And during this time, Podesai picks up a critical elimination and manages to harpoon a ton of loot back as well, including materials. Harpoon being almost essential on high ground this season so that you can continually get these refreshes. Once they're kind of moving towards the end of the game, they start pressuring the second height team, which is Andlex's team in this particular, to ensure that they don't try and make a play for high ground. This is successful, they don't end up picking up any of these eliminations, however they do end up just continually pressuring the way and securing high ground for themselves. At this point, notice neither their inventory has any white heals in terms of floppers and the team down below may, so it is a 2v2 situation, they have no heal off, zones are closing, so basically the risk right now is that the other team they're fighting may have heal off, so rather than playing it slow, they have to play super aggressive, they box dive and pick up the victory royale. Overall, this game was pretty much won because they took that early high ground, not because of anything else. They put themselves in a really good position from 4th zone onwards, and this really just enabled them to play very well throughout the game and pick up the victory royale because of the fact that they set themselves up so well earlier on. This wasn't a complicated height retake. In game 2, Andlex, Snazy and X-Squeeze positioned themselves relatively close to where 5th zone ended up popping, and that moment all popped peppers and took height relatively easily. The ability to build up so fast is one of the beautiful things about Peppers and why it's such a big strat in their team. Now they maintained it pretty much throughout all of the moving zones, only picking up 3 total eliminations. However, this game was not won by Andlex, Snazy and X-Squeeze. This was won by Bubak, Nebs and Waze, who are on low ground completely fragging out this game with 12 eliminations total. So where did it go wrong for Andlex's team because they were in the commanding position? Well, on high ground, like I mentioned, they only got 3 eliminations, but they didn't actually manage to harpoon any of that loot and actually refresh their materials back from this. If you notice at the start of moving zones, Andlex had 7 uses of the harpoon in his inventory, and towards the end he still had 7, so they weren't actually effectively able to get those materials back from those eliminations, meaning that they just straight ran out. Now because Bubak's team were on low ground, popping off, picking up tons of eliminations, they were constantly getting refreshes back, so they had more materials. When it came down to the final 3v3, Bubak hit a massive shot to pick up one of the members of the other team, and it was just a duel when they had materials and Andlex's team did not, making them pick up the victory royale. So remember, if you're on high ground, it's super critical that you use that harpoon to keep you refreshed, because same thing will happen to you as what happened to Andlex here. Game 3 seems like a similar story where we're talking about Andlex, Snazy and X-Squeeze yet again. However, this time they got the God RNG sitting on that side of the kind of south of the zone where everyone else was not. They managed just to build up then from there on and claim high ground straight away just because of some good RNG. Now going into 5th zone, they were all pretty much capped on mats, so they're in a really good spot. Again, with no eliminations, note. However, this time, the first moving zone pulled over this massive mountain, and a lot of teams really struggled in this particular game. If you remember back to game 1, it pulled up the hill. Remember I said this was going to make teams fight a lot on the low ground and cause a lot of teams to be scuffed? Well, that exact same thing happened here, but to a monumental scale because of the size of this mountain. So what that meant was, because Andlex's team was on high ground, they were able to really effectively cheap tarp, in particular just using peppers, get ahead using minimal mats. Plus, because the lobby was dying out relatively quickly because of the awkward zone, because of this massive hill, this meant that they didn't need to use all of those materials all the way down till the 9th zone. So this game actually ended a zone before that, whereas you can see the final 3v3, the match was relatively open. There were just scuffed players all the way on low ground. So they didn't have a harpoon this game, but purely due to the zone, that didn't actually end up affecting them too badly at all. The biggest takeaway from these kind of zones is if you see massive hill zones, you have to ensure that you're on a higher layer as early as possible and that you are not one of the people stuck down below clustered in amongst everyone else, because if the zone doesn't pull your way, it may be wraps for you. Game 4 was won by ADN, Hardro. Every time I say this, I said the same thing last video. God, I hate this. Game 4 was won by Aiden, Hardfind, and Astro. And these guys had a really typical playstyle that we've seen a lot of people do with the mid-ground layering, which actually didn't win many games this FNCS, interestingly enough. So what these guys did was they got far ahead of the zone, first or second moving. In this game in particular, it was second moving. And they noticed a weakness in high ground in the fact that they stayed too far at the back. This allowed them to open up the roofs and focus spray the players on height. Whilst this was happening, this made it very easy for one of the teammates just to crank up and take height from the front, and eventually winning out the game because of this. This is an extremely common way to take high ground and probably one of the most effectively used in the kind of mid to moving zones rather than just taking height early. Now what the team on height should have done, in this case they were particularly scuffed because I'm pretty sure Nate's team also went to take height, was just try to keep as far ahead as possible and keep enough horizontal space covered in the zone. If you just stay all the back, all three of you, it's very easy for a team to just tunnel ahead, look up, and just spray you out and take height themselves. So you need to ensure you have players at the back of the zone, someone at the front as well, and at least someone kind of hovering between wherever they need help. Game 5 was won by Hottie, Elicrats, and Trippern. These guys did not win from high ground, they actually won from low ground. Now very similar to Booback's team in Game 2, these guys were on low ground, just popping off, picking up multiple eliminations throughout, and this came down to a 2v2v1 in the endgame. Now what kind of mistakes did the high ground team make? Well, firstly, they completely ran out of materials. And why is this so important? Now, if we look on low ground, we see Hottie pick up a crucial elimination on the solo player left of Waze, and this gets him the siphon materials and allows him to block off his top, which gives the team on top nowhere to spray down. This is fine. This doesn't mean that a height team of Chris and Vortex can't win, it just means that they have a little bit more difficulty to play through because the other team actually has materials, whereas they don't. So what they do is Vortex drops down in front into the zone, tries to take shots, and obviously it gets picked up because he got a 2v1. Then Chris drops down behind them and basically does the same thing and ends up losing. Now what they should have done is drop down at the exact same time, one in front, one behind, creating a complete pinch all the way around each opponent, and this would have allowed them to pick up the Victory Royale. However, they dropped separately, which made them lose. Now, why did they have to make this play? Again, they had no materials on high ground. The two games so far that we've watched that have been lost from high ground, the teams have run out of materials because they didn't be able to get any refreshes and use their harpoon efficiently, and then they've made a 50-50 play essentially. To be honest, with Chris' team, it was worse than a 50-50 because it was just 1v2 and a 1v2 again. Game 6 was won by Fury, Dementos, and Jamside, and they had another very familiar way of taking high ground. Notice earlier on they positioned themselves relatively close to height in 5th zone. However, they were not able to secure it here because the team was consistently pressuring them down below. However, they all popped their peppers, and at this point, continually all went for height at the same time. Now they all managed to quite easily wipe out the team on high ground by completely pinching them and pressuring them from different angles, and this was an incredibly easy height retake from this point. This is the second time, along with Andalex sneezing XWeeze, that we've seen the team just take height using the peppers very easily, very effectively, which is again another reason why they are so good. From then on out, they had the materials and the ammo, they just kept consistently spraying down below until it was the final 3v3. At this moment, Fury and Dementos dropped down, going for eliminations, whilst Jamside had the floppers to heal off. Didn't seem like he just had enough heals because the opposing team also had white heals to heal off with, but he managed to hit a massive pump shot and pick up the Victory Royale. This Victory Royale also qualified them for the finals because this placed them in 3rd after this massive shot. So that big one pump shot actually qualified them for the finals alone. So let's do a little bit of a recap and a bit of a summary on what are the reasons and how players are taking height right now. The first way to take height is be relatively lucky, however positioning yourselves in a good spot in the 4th zone, and then when 5th zone appears you will already have that 5th zone or be close enough to be able to build in and take height in 5th. Now hopefully in this position you're going to have enough materials to keep you going through the end game, and if not, you're going to need to use your harpoon to keep you refreshed and keep you moving. Now, how to actually fully play out high ground once you're on there in terms of tarping, I'm maybe putting another video in the future on how to split tarp, etc. But a lot of people know this kind of stuff already from many seasons ago, and I've covered it in a lot of my FNCS videos as well. The second is just general use of peppers, which we've obviously seen quite a few times. This can be done at multiple different times, so really just popping peppers, either letting the team on height get ahead of you while you're far at the back and then ramping up behind them, or getting ahead of them and then ramping up in front of them, as we kind of saw more in that most recent one. So just generally trying to sneak up with peppers, very, very efficient. The next one is what we also only saw once, surprisingly, because a lot of these teams are relatively solidified on high ground, which was in game 4 when we saw Aiden's team win, which was getting ahead of the moving zones, looking back and pressuring the high ground team. Please like the video if you haven't liked the video already, and subscribe as well, it really helps me out. Peace.